Hello.
Hello, hi
Hello,
everyone.
can you hear me clearly?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah, the ecosystem governance just wrapped up, so be more people popping on in a
All
minute or
right.
two.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hi
Hey, hey,
Samantha.
hey.
Hey Wenjing, how was your travels?
Good, good, good.
Are you
Good
jet
to be
lagged?
back home too.
Huh?
Good to be back home.
Are you jet lagged?
Not too much.
Did you fly east? Oh, wait,
Yeah,
west.
yeah. I think this direction is a little better because you kind of when you're on your return, you gain some time back so you can sleep.
Yeah, yes.
Oh well. I have well, we have both Drummond and also Marcus. Um,
Sabadello?
in the same conference, so we have a little chat as well.
Oh, great. It's Maki, Kirti.
Hello.
Page,
Hey, Maki.
share.
So Samuel, are you in Oxford or are you in
Yes,
oh.
right now, let's see if I can show it. I'm calling from with a typical British weather, hitting with yes,
Love
so
it.
hitting with the calling from Oxford right now.
Okay. I guess Samir, you'll be our guest presenting lightweight agent standard working group.
All right,
Uh,
thank you.
Okay, well, before I let you go, probably I need to do the announcement for the antitrust policy and the trust of IP's PR policy. And, we provide the link, and this is every single meeting. We consistently remind people those are the policy we need to follow. So with maybe also a quick ask if anyone want to have any questions or issues with the agenda today. Very done. We will jump on the first agenda. Now, Samir, you can go. Thank you.
All right, so let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I'm Sam. I'm currently doing a PhD in Oxford. I work with Microsoft on agent communication and collaboration. And besides that, I'm the chair of the Lightweight Agent Standards Working Group. And so today I wanted to give again I've met Eric through this working group, and so I wanted to give an overview of what we do and what we're focusing on right now, which is in particular agent permissions or JSON. So in short, the last WG was formed after two conversations I had. One was with the Stanford HAI, which is the Human AI Interaction Institute, where we basically were discussing that we need standards for LLM agents, and nobody, or at least at the time when we were discussing it, there was nobody building it. And so I went to speak with the W3 folks because I work a lot with some folks connected to team, and we basically they told me, yes, we are aware that there are LM agents being created and they need standards, but we're not gonna codify anything because the industry is not mature enough. And so this creates a sort of like chicken and egg scenario where first you need some maturity, but in order to get maturity, you need the infrastructure and so on. And so this was how the last WG was formed. The idea is we create simple standards that are not meant to be the final standards that will be used for in the future. That's the job of W3C, IETF, all the various standard organizations. And by doing that, we push the system towards a level of maturity when then the official organizations can come. and standardize. So we mostly focus on simple standards, fast iteration, and these sort of things. And in practice, it's mostly the members are mostly a mix of agent companies and universities with labs working on agents, with a couple extra additions such as the Cosmos Institute, for example, which is a non-profit. And yeah, so we meet fortnightly, and we've been mostly working right now on the permission side of agents. And in particular, we're doing some work on agent permissions.json, we call it. Basically, the problem is that right now, when you have a browser agent, you do not have any system with which you can say what you can and cannot do as an agent, in the sense of a browser using LLM-based agent when interacting with a website. We have robots.txt, but in practice, a lot of the side of standards surrounding interactions between agents and UIs is not there. And in practice, what's happened is that there been an increase in the use of 503s. There's been the most obvious example of pushback against this practice has been Cloudflare's AI Labyrinth, which I don't know if you're familiar, but it's basically AI generated garbage that is fed to the web page, so that if the agent, like if the website thinks that it's interacting with an agent, then it shows some garbage that a normal human will never read, but in practice it keeps it locked in a sort of loop, exploring more and more pages that go nowhere. In practice, this is very funny and very smart, but you're blocking all the legitimate uses of browser agents. Stuff like accessibility tools, stuff like gathering data for pulling different data from sources, stuff like, in general, executing workflows on behalf of a user. All of these can be very useful for a human, but they're blocked because right now the websites tend to block every form of agent interaction. And in a way, this was quite similar to what was happening with robots.txt back then, where you had indiscriminate crawling, and then you had some legitimate crawling uses, and websites could not tell the two apart. In practice, how did they fix this? They did it with robots.txt, and so that's what we've been doing essentially. The agent permissions.json is a simple robots.txt style document where we have interactions with a web page, and we specify what can and cannot be done when an agent interacts with a website. There's three main forms of guidance. One is on the type of resources that can be accessed. For example, you can say, you must not click this button. You must not read the contents of this paragraph, etc. Some general actions that can be performed. These are much broader in that sense. So it's something like, you must not message users, for example. And when possible, we also say, hey, agent, instead of interacting with my UI, call this API, use this MCP tool, and so you avoid all of the UI interaction, and I don't spend a lot of time and bandwidth serving this UI to you. And in practice, why have three different specifications in the same document? Because they handle very specific alternatives for control of an agent. So in the sense that for the resource rules, you must not click this button. You can put it at the level of the browser. Like a lot of agents use a headless browser to interact with a web page. You can, between the LLM, which performs the actions, and the actual browser, you can put some rules. And so in practice, you can enforce these rules, like you must not click this button, in a very strict way. Instead, for stuff like you must not be able to message users, which cannot be formalized in that sense, we use it as part of the prompt. So in practice, the LM has access to this information, but it's up to the LM to follow it. So in this way, it's not as tightly controlled as it would be for the for access to specific HTML elements. And finally, why offer these alternative pathways? Because in practice, MCP tools will and the API routes will always be more reliable than interacting with a web page. And in practice, it's what the developer of the website wants to use. Like if you're an agent, ideally, whenever there's an API available, you should use that instead. Now, like robots.txt, this is not there is no enforcement layer, and this is a very it's a very intentional design decision. The idea is that right now the ecosystem is not powerful enough, and like there's not enough maturity to pick one specific ID system and one specific permission system and an enforcement system and ask every agent to follow those rules or get locked out. This in practice is not reliable for the purpose of enforcing a standard. Instead, like robots.txt, we want to lay the groundwork for this type of stuff, where first we start by having a way for websites to say, hey, if you're a good agent, follow these rules. That reduces the malicious traffic done by good agents. Obviously, it will not stop malicious agents from interacting with your website, but it's fundamentally a problem of scale when we talk about agent interactions with a website. Agent interaction with your web page becomes a problem when you have too much of it. If you can cut down on the invalid interactions that you want to block, and you have some level, a certain percentage of agents that follow the rules, in practice, you're reducing the bandwidth problems, you're reducing the intensity of these interaction problems, and that's why, in practice, you can it forms a less adversarial relationship between the agent companies and the websites. And to give you an example, I have here like an example of the standard simple JSON file with some metadata. So, and here we can see the example for resource rules. So, for example, you are always, for all HTML elements, you are allowed to read content, but you're forbidden from following links that match this CSS, so private area, and but you're allowed to click elements that match this specific XPath. So in practice, you can use either CSS selectors or XPath selectors. And in practice, there are also some modifiers you can do, where you can, for example, limit the number of interactions in a certain time window. This is for resource rules. Instead, when we talk about action guidelines, you can have stuff like you must not send direct messages to users except blah blah blah. And finally, for the APIs, we keep it very, very, very simple. It's just stuff like, hey, if you're sending a message to the user, how about instead you use this open API endpoint you can find here, and here you can find the documentation. And this is pretty much it. Like there's a few extra things for some modifiers, but in practice, it's a JSON file that can be written in 5 minutes. And for the majority of uses, you can just leave these action guidelines and say, hey, please, agent, don't do these specific things I don't like, and that's it. Or if you really want to ban the use of agents at all, you can just do selector all, allowed false. And basically you're forbidding all interactions with the website. And any questions about this stuff before we start like the proper discussion, etc.?
Are these rules just recommendations, or is
Yes.
there enforcement behind it?
The recommendations in the style of robots.txt, as I
Okay.
explained a bit before, right now there is not enough maturity and not enough consolidation in terms of agent interaction practices, which is why the reasoning is that we cannot enforce all agent interactions, because fundamentally an agent interaction is very hard to distinguish from a user interaction. What we do is that when there are legitimate interactions with the legitimate agents interacting with a web page, then we can put some norms around that. Is this enough to prevent malicious uses? Obviously not, but it's mostly a matter of scale. The objective of this standard is to allow genuine agents to interact with a web page in the appropriate way, in the same way that robots.txt allows genuine crawlers to interact with a website. Neither of them stop malicious use, but it's the scale that is the main problem rather than the specific malicious use. And right now, again, since we have a lot of partners with like agent organizations, we're looking into we're working with them to test how much burden an agent gets from following these extra permissions, because of course this is extra information in the context of the language model. It's extra information, it's extra rules surrounding the interaction with the web page. So we're working with them to make sure that it doesn't burden the agent too much. And in the meantime, we're talking with Cloudflare, because they've been also working a lot on gating interactions between agents and websites. And they followed a very hardline approach in that sense. Again, they've added an option to block all agent interactions, and now they're adding some systems to require payment when you interact with a web page, which frankly hasn't seen a lot of use. What we found very interesting, we will see probably more resistance from the website side of things. Some agent frameworks, is this meeting recorded?
Yes.
So I cannot say which agent framework, but one of the big ones basically said, no, we don't care about that. We will violate every terms of service ever. I don't know if that will continue. We still are keeping a channel open with them, but in practice, from the website, from instead the other agent companies, we've seen much more openness to this, because again, they know that they are basically in a legal gray area. They know that it's unclear whether they're back in terms of service, what could be the consequences. This is a very clear way for websites to tell in a machine readable way, here's what your agent can do without us suing you, essentially. And yeah, we're working on a white paper in the meantime to promote the standard. And we are currently developing some tooling, basically something that you can just be, again, we have some very simple prompts. You just feed this to your favorite LLM and it generates a document. But in practice, we're looking to get something a bit more advanced, something like, hey, you link a certain website, you give a few instructions about what you want to allow and forbid. It gives you the JSON file, and you just stick that in your website. And yeah, so this is pretty much what we've been working on. And so far, we've seen some positive success, some positive results from this. But you guys are more, especially on the way stronger on the internet infrastructure side, while we're more on the LLM side. So I'm more than glad to hear your feedback about all of this. Yes, Wenjin.
Yeah, I'll go ahead
and
with with a question on what the kind of behavior you expect the agent to do. Presumably, it's a declaration, and then ideally, a agent is collaborating, so the agent would read the document, understand the what is allowed, what's not, and the intent, and then supposed to follow it.
Yes.
Um, have you guys looked into like how good LM-based agents are able to follow rules in
Yes.
this particular format, and
In
what
pra
may be the better format, for instance? I think that would be very interesting.
in practice, when we started, they were definitely bad at it, which is why we also have the resource rules. Like the advantage of the resource rules is that you don't have to trust the LM to follow the instructions, since you can you can enforce it at the browser level, in the sense of the headless browser. For the general guidelines, when we started, they were terrible at it, which is why we definitely put some provisions for that. Now I say that in practice, I will estimate a 90% following rate. Not ideal, but when using combination with the resource rules, in practice you get a solid performance, like less than 1% of failures to follow, which is still too much. But we see that the more the agents develop, the better they get at this type of stuff.
And the following of the rule in permission file, is that purely based on like a prompt level, conversation level rule following, or
So
is
the
anything
for
like any training, anything else going on here?
it depends in general for the action rules, again, because again the resource rules have another type of enforcement. For the
Yeah.
action rules, it's mostly just in the prompt. Like typically
Okay.
you don't need much than that. And there's a question from Eric.
Wait, sorry, what do you mean it's in the prompt? Just to follow on that one.
Yeah, so are you, I don't know how you guys are familiar with like the React paradigm for agents. Basically, what you do is that you have an initial prompt, and then the agent starts performing actions, and it gets all of the feedback from the actions gets added to the context window. So
Mhm.
when I mean prompt, I mean everything textual that the LLM is reading. And so with that, a classical workflow would be the user asks the model to perform an action. There's a start in the query. At the same time as you query in the web page, it also checks if there's an agent permissions.json. If there is, the agent framework adds to the context of the LLM. Hey, this is the agent framework, this is the agent permissions file. Here's the semantics, unless it's been explicitly trained to know that semantics. But in general, you will add the semantics of the standard. Make sure you follow these rules, and then it executes its own actions, etc.
Have, can I jump in again?
Yeah.
So, as a follow-up, how does the browser side it's certain that this permission file itself is not abused? They could ask things, they could put something there to do that I would not agree to, for example.
Absolutely. And this is okay. This is with something we actually study, not as part of the last WG, but as part of the other institute of the institute I run, the EDI. But yeah, in practice, that's indeed a thing. The prompt injection is called adversarial UI attack,
Yeah.
and actually, like our group also works on that, but it's in a separate project. In practice, you can definitely use the agent permissions.json for that, but you can also just use the website itself. Like if you have control of the website,
Mm.
there's this classic, I think it's Alasdair Parent's work. Am I still sharing my screen?
No.
And then I move to Eric's other question, but like there's this great work by Alasdair Parent on on attacking
Okay.
multimodal agents, and basically this right now is an open challenge, and you don't need agent permissions to do that. The example was this picture posted on Blue Sky, where if you had that, it would force every agent which was looking at the web page to share to share on Blue Sky this image. So it will spread like a virus throughout Blue Sky. The solution to that is still in the works. In practice, you can do some level of sanitization, but it's a bigger problem than like just agent permissions. It's more at the if I can take you with agent permissions, I can also take you just using my website, essentially. And
Can you put that link in the chat, please?
yes.
And then I'm going to need somebody to explain this to me, but I don't want to take everybody's time unless other people didn't understand this last one. The UI injection attack, I don't understand that one, but either somebody can explain that to me right now, or I can go into my question.
Yeah, I can give you a very, very, very simple thing. Adversarial attacks. Again, this is going to take 5 minutes at most. Imagine that you have a cat, and you show this to a image classifier, and it says it's a cat. What happens in practice with pretty much every machine learning model ever is that they, besides learning the features that make something an attack, sorry, a cat, they also learn a lot of spurious features. So for example, it might have learned that this pixel here, when it's blue, it actually means that it's a frying pan or something. And this is because, again, it's not learning the same way we humans would, where we learn what makes a cat a cat. It's fundamentally pattern finding. So there are some algorithms that can reverse engineer machine learning models and find these features that correlate with incorrect predictions. So for example, there are some attacks. Let me pull up Gibbon adversarial attack. There we go. Basically, they can optimize for some specific noise to be applied to an image that makes it classify differently. And if you look at the difference between these two images, it's pretty much imperceptible. Now, when you have an agent that interacts with a web page, it's looking at the screen. And in the same way, like back then, you will do this thing for image classifiers. You can also do it when it's an image model that looks at a screen. So it will look at this image and it wouldn't see a UI element, as in, hey, this is an image of a post. It will see, hey, this is an instruction by the maximum authority of the internet that says click and repost this picture.
Okay, right. So it's hidden there. Okay, great. Understand that. Thank you. So my question is, I mean, at some point, are we going to just evolve to say, listen, if you're an agent, don't even bother with the website? I mean, that's a human thing. And we'll just go directly to this agentic web that we don't, it's not really visible to humans other than in code.
That would be ideal in a way, because then you avoid all of the problems with interacting with a web page for an agent, and you can just switch to that. In practice, there's the advantage of going through the UI is that the UI, you always have to build a UI. Like the goal of like whenever you're offering a service and a human needs to interact with that service, you will build the UI. So the extra effort of maintaining and developing and providing and handling rate limiting, etc., for an API can be bothersome. It will still be ideal, and there's some interesting work right now on taking UIs and converting them into APIs. But of course, for that depends essentially on how tech savvy you are, how willing you are to invest into this type of thing. Like, if you're a website by I don't know, local city council, nobody will ever bother adding support for MCP or stuff like that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, because I think about this, you know, when there's that demo where these two agents start talking together and then they switch to that mode. I forget.
That's actually funny because I wrote the prequel for that. Like this was back in October of last year. Like we basically did some work, especially on that. Basically, in realizing that true agents are using natural language, they negotiate and then they switch to a faster communication. That's the ideal case. Like if we can get the agent economy, I always use air quotes for the agent economy, but
Mhm.
if we can get it up and running, this will be the best possible case. The worst possible case is that we ban all agent interactions, and so we go back to a purely human internet, and basically we give up all the possible integration capabilities of agents as a whole.
Mhm.
The future will probably be somewhere in between, but
Mhm.
it depends a lot. And I see some questions. So I see Stephen Bill asking, can you deploy an MCP or A2A to integrate other tools? I'm not sure I understand the question. If you can.
Yeah, so I was just curious, with the robot text style JSON, it seems that the agent would find that text file and consume it and figure out what it can and can't do.
Indeed.
That's the objective.
Yes.
So it's up to the LLM to interpret it, right? There's no hard coding there at all. But if you had an MCP server, an A2A server that I could use for my agent, then I would delegate that interpretation to your agent, and you would say what I can and can't do. You'd be the police or the guardian of all those websites.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you can enrich your text file all you want, but you're still the intermediary. So your service, let's say your MCP or A2A agent, would always get smarter and smarter, and your point of failure would not be some other agent not really understanding what to do with that text file, especially if it changes every 5 minutes, which it's going to be.
Okay, on the first part, which is about whether there's no enforcement, there is enforcement. Okay. Oh, you mean on the server side? Yes.
Yeah.
This connects to like my previous answer, where ideally you would always want things to go from MCP or even just regular APIs. In practice, the effort of maintaining a separate interface for agents, especially in 2025, where it's still a very niche things, serving and maintaining and developing this type of infrastructure is definitely not enough right now, in the sense that it's much simpler to just lap a document and say, hey, by the way, don't click this button, or like, please, agent, don't do this, than to set up a whole separate infrastructure. It's funny
But then
because
every agent has to be able to understand what that text file, what the intention of the text file is.
the great thing about that is that
It's not
they
like,
don't.
sorry, but it's not like an API where you say, I'm going to click the button and it says, no, you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's a low tech solution in a sense. Of course, it will, and that's why in practice in the document we also have. Let me pull it up. We also have some way to specify whether you want to go for APIs or MCP servers, because with this you can basically say, hey, don't even bother interacting. This is the reason why we have this standard in the first place, is that due to a multitude of reasons, mainly the fact that most websites do not offer APIs, mainly the fact that some services offered by the API are not some services offered by the website are not covered by the APIs. A lot of automated interaction is being moved to LLM-based agents. That's bad. That's bad in a way, and we wanna reduce the damage that happens with that, while still saying, hey, at the end of the day, if there's an endpoint, go to the endpoint. Don't bother with the website, because as you say, it's much that you can there's like 40 years of access control research that you can apply.
Yeah. So
In that
my only
case.
question is, why not your organization be that endpoint for those that can't do it as a service, like a managed service, right? Like, I understand every website cannot implement their own MCP or API, but that's for sure. But you could act as the intermediary for those that can't do it.
I guess
So
we could,
if an agent hits somebody's website and they say, "Oh, I delegate that problem to these guys. They have an endpoint, and I trust them to click the right buttons because they're going to follow my text file." But if you're an agent, you're going over there.
if I'm an agent. Sorry,
The way the text file reads now, if I understand correctly, is I put this text file on my website, and in the event that I do not have my own MCP or API interface for the agent to talk to, I'm going to have all these rules like don't send a message and you can click here and click there.
Yeah.
But ideally, since every website, let's say, can't put together my own MCP or A2A server, I could delegate that to you, to your organization as a service, let's say, and I trust you to follow my text file. I don't have to trust the other LLM to interpret the text file. I can just say, instead of saying 503, I say, "Oh, I'm redirecting you to these guys. I'll let them deal with what you can get on my website, but you go through these guys. You don't go directly to me."
Okay, I can see the argument for that. It's probably a bit bigger in scope. Like this is you're basically pitching a startup idea in a way with this, and we
It's my nature.
That's a large, a very large intermediaries.
yeah, and by all means, if
Well, but it bootstraps things for those that can't do it, because there's a big gap between between a text file and any site that can actually deploy an MCP server right now. Not everybody can do it, but you can certainly delegate it to somebody else you trust to do it on your behalf.
The problem is that when the point of control for the user interact with the website, if you don't, you could set up something intermediate where basically the agent interacts with the intermediate, and the intermediate is trusted to follow the rules. But at that point, it's simpler to just work with the companies developing the agents and say, "Hey, follow the rules in the first place." Because if they don't want to follow the rules, then there is no reliable enforcement mechanism, even if we were to introduce captchas at every level or authentication systems. So it could work. Like it will definitely, I think, in some cases, move up things. But in practice, the effort for setting up this intermediary is much larger than just saying to the agent companies, "Hey, add this to your prompt," and that's it. In practice, the same way you cannot enforce following the rules, you also cannot enforce using the intermediary, essentially. What you could
Isn't
do.
Isn't that what the 503 does? It says, "Oh, you're an agent, off you go. Nothing to see here."
The problem
So
is that
could you do the same thing? You say, "Nothing to see here, except if you want to talk to my agent over here."
It would if there hadn't been a lot of advancements on agent camouflage. Basically, if an agent wants to appear as a human, it will appear as a human, and you will not be able to 503 it. And so absolutely, there's now actually some work roughly in that direction you propose, but more like taking a website and offering it as an MCP server. And what the MCP tool does in practice is interact with the website. So in practice, it's again a very low tech solution for offering an MCP tool. But in our specific case, we're more interested in the role between agents that use the browser and the websites, while promoting the use of MCP/other tools as the gold standard.
Thanks.
And I'll do first a question by Kirti, and then I move to Engine. So very interesting. Is there any work done on how this permission will interpret by different LLMs? In other words, is there standard ways to enforce actions across all LLMs uniformly? In practice, we don't think it's that. I mean, it would be a very interesting thing to test. In practice, the moment you have you offer the semantic to the LLM, most frontier agents roughly behave the same, in the sense that, Of course, there are some small differences. For example, Gemini is the worst one. OpenAI, ChatGPT is the best one in that sense. But pretty much all of them right now tend to follow the instructions, with the caveats I mentioned before in another question. And Wedgie.
Yeah, I was just asking, see if you guys have a literature survey or some kind of a survey of all the research being done in this area, both in terms of following the rules, like an agent reading these rules and with go face following it, and on the opposite side of trying to get around or not following. Um, do you guys see more systematic research in these topics?
In the sense of like proper benchmarking of these, no. Like most of our feedback comes from the agent companies themselves, which have been testing them internally, and they say, yes, this model works better for us. This doesn't follow instructions. There's definitely some work on instruction following as a whole,
Mm.
in the sense that because of course it's very important for agentic workflows. Off the top of my mind, I don't think there is a formal work on LLM-based web agents and instruction following. That is something I would need to check, but I'm not aware of any service
Yeah,
on that
yeah.
sense.
I'm especially like I know like there's instruction following. I thought this would be slightly different because instruction following is what to do. Over here, we are trying to say what um, well, it's a more abstract way of saying what not to do, right? And I think on the server side of evaluating whether, the agent is following it, there seem to be a necessary some kind of a more formalized framework to evaluate whether that's actually going on.
Okay, so you're saying from a research perspective, it will make more sense to test, to benchmark and compare different agents in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. You might want to have a data set, for instance, like describing all kind of rules one may ask, and then how well they're following. And the rule can get very complicated. I think in the end, the complexity of rules are not limited, right? It can becomes
Oh yeah,
very,
yeah.
yeah,
Especially for the action rules. Like you cannot DM users. You could say you cannot DM users from 2 a.m. to 3 p.m. on these specific
yeah,
conditions,
yeah.
blah blah blah.
And you can introduce some more abstract notions in the rule, and if there's no limit in what kind of rule you can write, it seems that this is it's a problem that is not very well understood yet.
Oh yeah, for sure. And on that topic, let me also tell you that in the specific case of MCP tool use,
Yeah.
the level of permissions is still also not very well understood. Like for example, like how well they follow these instructions. There's definitely some gaps on that. Like besides like the last WG, I run a research institute and where we do interaction between agents. We studied it from a security perspective, and we're doing some specific work on the tooling for agent for instruction following, and even like basic stuff like permission management for MCP tools is non-existent. We do work on that, for example. In practice, I agree that there is still very little understood, and that's like the was also prompted us like all of these agents interacting with websites is a very young field, probably too young for its own good, and so it's about doing like the low hanging fruits, like the basic of the basic, because that still beats what is going right now, which is that agents have no security infrastructure at all and no permission infrastructure at all. And that has already caused some major financial damages, like not company ending, but stuff like a guy losing $80,000 because someone promptly injected the agent.
If you've got that little piece of evidence, I'd love to see that. And I also wanted to just say that thank you for coming and sharing. I wanted to see if there's any synergy with what we're doing here in this working group and our task forces and all that. I also know we have an agenda, so I wanted to see if we're following the agenda or if we want to continue talking with Samuele. And Samuele, you're always welcome here. We meet every Thursday at this time. But yeah, I wanted to see if there's any synergies because and maybe I don't know if Wenjing wants to explain a little bit about what we're doing with TMCP and TA2A, or we want to go with the agenda. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And so, Samuela, if your group find interesting, I'm also happy to, maybe do a return visit and present to you what we've been doing. But very quickly, the Trust of IP trying to work on a trust framework. I think that's the best way to say it. That means, identification, authentication, authorization. There's a whole slew of problems that may be very relevant. One simple example would be to prevent a prompt injection, for instance, by identifying who is actually producing the prompt. So instead of simply say, here are the rules, you may be able to say, oh, here are the rules being asked by this particular web page. Okay, so that's much more specific, and the agent may be able to then interpret it in a way how much or how strictly to follow, right? And so identifying the entity, the actor behind it, and ensuring that the prompts are legitimate and they are not being tampered with. All of those can create an environment the agent would be able to actually function better. And doesn't solve all the problems we're discussing, but it does solve one problem. I think is beyond authentication is some kind of accountability. So if something goes wrong, you can attribute to who was the one telling me to do this, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
I don't want to like completely derail the meeting, but do you guys know the Loyal Agents group in Stanford? Because like they do a lot of work, especially on that. Like you should probably talk to them as well. And they're part of the last WG. So like the Stanford working group specifically on the as you said identity authorization authentication infrastructure for agents. So you might also want to talk to them. And in particular, if you know somebody who is a researcher, ideally a graduate researcher, and wants to do 10 or 12 months fully funded in Stanford working on this stuff, we have funding to send him there. Like if you know somebody who might also be interested in this research. But yeah, you should probably talk to the Loyal Agents guys because like they're involved with the working group and they pretty much focus on what you told me about. So like I think there would be a lot of interesting synergy in that.
Yeah, Daza and Tobin and Andor's been doing a lot of work with those guys, and Consumer Reports is they're part of the first person project, is that right?
That I don't know. Like I'm not familiar with Consumer Reports.
Right.
But yeah, in practice, yeah, the way at MIT now they moved to Stanford, but pretty much to do infrastructure for agents.
Yeah. And then I think Wenjing would be great at some point to talk about the trust spanning protocol. Not today, but I think maybe Samuel, your group and or groups may be interested in the trust spanning protocol. Did I send that to you earlier?
I think you sent it to me like months ago, and then like at this point I've kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
But
so if you're interested in going back to
yes,
that,
I will pick up that conversation.
You've got the architect here, Wenjing, so he can explain it.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, I let the rest of the meeting continue now.
Thank you very much, Samuela. And let me see. So we have 10 minutes. Let me get, here. Let me get back to the agenda. So the rest of agenda, I think is a continuation, but a core topic is really to discuss there is a blog post on several working groups, and then I think there are questions about how these working group relate to each other, and where we are and where those other groups are. And so that's the bulk of the discussion. We probably don't have time to finish it, but maybe simply put the main bullet up here. And so we could think about it, read about the some of the groups. And the two groups we are closest right now are these two. And so I'll put some simple introduction in a way. So the DTG, which is a decentralized trust group graph, sorry, um, and that is uh, uh, actually rely on our work and rely on TSP as well. So we can dig more into that. The DIF has a Trusted AI Agent Working Group. So these acronyms really long. Um, uh, it appears to be based on my conversations. It's focused on a higher layers. So the two questions really, I think this first deliverable they're working on is agentic authority workflow. So this is looking at the agents and how permissions happen, how do delegation, etc. Right? There is an ongoing question of whether those work will be based on DICOM versus TSP, of course, and just refresh our memory or history that we also talked to them about running DICOM on top of a TSP, and so those are all possibilities. And then I listed a bunch of other related activities. So if anyone's familiar with, maybe I should put it into the Stanford group here as well. So we would, I think, help us focus on where we can best add value without, the commitment we can do. Neil.
Yeah, one thing that comes up, like just FYI, you guys have heard it, but Samuel has probably not. I'm with a DIF group, which is the Hospitality and Travel Working Group. We're working on a very comprehensive travel profile. So you as a traveler are going to have very deep information about you. Some of it is preferences. Hey, I want to, this is my favorite airline. Here's my favorite airline seat. But there's a whole huge amount of information around medical. Right. So you've got a lot of the constraints that, you have an accident overseas. Somebody needs to get access to certain medical information. Similarly, so that's a good example. Things like allergies, right? That you need to have access to. The other one may be emergency contacts, something you actually do not want to disclose, even in a temporary form, because you may have very sensitive information about the people who were the emergency contacts. So that strikes me very much that, this kind of rule system that you would apply to segments of the actual, it's going to be JSON, it's a JSON structure. There's going to be an agent that's going to manage that, but the agent itself needs to know, okay, who am I allowed to share this stuff with, right? So certain medical information, oh, it's a doctor's office. Yes, I can share it with that. Something like that. So there are certainly embedded within that profile, we could certainly see embedding some rules and the agent has to honor in terms of the actions that go with it. So that certainly fits in with what you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, this is too big of a topic for today. So I'm going to just post it here. I'll post some notes here. Please take a look and add the list if you want, so that next meeting we can have a focused discussion. This will help us, I think, put our focus, clarify our focus, and then maybe work on common deliverables. Yeah, Eric. You're muted.
Also, we talked about our own task force, which is very similar to what diff is doing, but we've got a broader framework perspective, whereas I think they're really looking at
Right.
tackling bit by bit delegation, authentication, authorization, identification, whereas our task force is more about the broader framework that all of these different problems, how they all fit together. So I think that's going to be on Mondays at 4 p.m. because we've done a poll, and Thursdays are packed, Fridays aren't good, Wednesdays. So it's going to be Monday or Tuesday, probably Monday. And I want to get that started, if not next week, the week after. But how do I get it into the calendar, into the Linux sort of official calendar? And also we
Yeah.
talked about, do we need official steering committee approval? And I think Steven said we don't need, task forces don't need official steering committee approval. Is that right?
So I think at least we should have a formal process to say, here, establish the task force, and we probably will report to the steering committee anyway, whether they want to, approve it or not. But that we can do, I think, as a working group.
Yep.
So this is my way of trying to summarize the ongoing, more organized activity. And maybe as a part of a next week's discussion, we should probably go through them as well. So basically have a better definition of each of the work thread, whether it's a formal task force or not, so that I think there's some clarity where our current focus are. Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, just if you scroll down to royal, it's loyal agents rather than royal agents.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry,
Click
that's
on
my
that,
accent.
see what comes up. See what comes up on royal agents.
I'm sorry. Okay. Did I spell?
Let me
I'm sorry.
put it in chat.
It's for sale.
AL?
Royal agents is for sale.
Ooh,
It's for sale.
new startup opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that will be great and good discussion. And Samuel, if you want to understand a lot of things we're doing, that discussion would also be, I think, very very good one to be part of too.
Mhm.
And let me see, we have 1 minute, so there are we will do the update next week as well. And won't be able to really introduce too much on what the TMCP and TA2A, but basically it's about running these protocols over a different trust framework or different trust layer. So today, think about it, most of that will be HTTPS, maybe OAuth. Those are the foundational mechanisms that the web protocols used for creating trust, and the TSP and its supporting functions would provide a different one. And so that's what this is about, and we'll probably have a more in-depth conversation on that in the next couple of weeks. We do have.
Sorry, did you have a demo ready for that one? Didn't you?
Yes, I do, and I have a new I had just had a recent presentation last week in that conference as well. The demos are available, and there's a lot of code examples as well. So part of those, we thought we submit a proposal for our symposium. It will be in November. And so I'm suggesting we do one presentation on day one and do a workshop basically into like how you actually develop a new MCP server, or for example with a TSP, and what kind of a new benefit you are getting from there and how to do it in day two. So that will be a more hands-on workshop into code and into actually solving some sample problems, for example. Anyway, that's just get out there, and we still have some time to prepare all of this in the following weeks. Okay, anyone want to have last minute things to bring up before we close? I like your background. What is going on there?
If you do 2 thumbs up,
Okay.
it's fireworks.
All right, great.
Mhm.
All right, well, so thank you again, Samuela, and hopefully
Thanks
to
for
see you.
having me.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks, Samuel, for coming.
No
Thank
worries.
you.
And we'll be in touch.
Cheers.
We'll-
All right.
Yeah, cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.